a lot of stuff to cover.
Yeah, we do.
But yeah, so I think there's of course the big topic around like TikTok celebrities, like engagement rates used to be, a thing that people were covering as well. And I'm curious with regards to some of these bigger topics. I mean, we could just jump right in with, I think, TikTok. Like that's probably the biggest thing that people are
Yeah.
very curious about. So curious to get, yeah, your take. I mean, it's been a whirlwind, like these past few weeks of the ban going through, kind of getting postponed,
For about 12
and things like
hours.
that. Exactly. So yeah, what was that like for you? And like, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, well, the way that we operate, mainly is with our campaigns, we typically, for most of our clients, to kind of cover our bases a little bit, what we do is we say, and actually cover our bases too. We usually say like, hey, what's your primary platform you guys want us to have influencers post on, and what's your secondary? So that way we have a backup plan in case a platform has any technical issues, they go down. Most of the influencers that are, performing on our campaigns, most of them have multiple platforms. So like, pretty much every TikTok influencer also has an IG. They may ignore their IG as much. They may not be on their IG all the time, but they have it. Or most major Instagram influencers also have a TikTok. So we'll reach out, and then what we'll do is we'll have them cross post across, multiple platforms. And in the case of like TikTok, that definitely was kind of a scary moment because we have a lot of campaigns that are operational, but we also, most of the influencers again that we have two platforms. So the way that we word it in our agreements with our clients, just to cover, the brand side and our side, is we have, primary and secondary focus, but we always include multiple platforms. So yeah, so that was a little scary, but TikTok's actually one of our partners. So we're actually an official partner of TikTok's, and there's not a whole lot of agencies that are official partners of TikTok in that way. So we actually heard about it in advance. We got emails from them and knew, and we've been in high level discussions with TikTok, pretty much since, for like a year and a half, 2 years. This has been a conversation that's been brewing for a
Wow.
while. Nonetheless, TikTok is here and remains here for the now. So we'll see where it all goes. But I have a feeling that it's gonna work out. That's my feeling.
Yeah, I think it makes a ton of sense. Like with regards to the ban coming, like sort of turning on for TikTok and then them putting up the screen that things were banned. And then that shortly being removed like 12 hours later. Like I think that there's a couple things happening. Like one, this ban has been a discussion for the past maybe like few years. But then it actually became real for the first time now. So one of the ways I look at it is it's almost like there's these different doors that were open for TikTok, but then now that one is clear that like the ban is truly possible because it did at least happen for that day or two. So that then creates, I think, some thinking with TikTok that okay, there's people aren't exactly like messing around here. Like this is actually uh, capable, of happening. So that's something we've seen for I think one of the very first times. Um, and with that, now I think teams are having to think about, okay, if this is, truly going to happen, what is my strategy going to be? Like, what are the ways I'm going to approach this? And you've mentioned like there's multi-platform with the influencers you work with, which is really good because that kind of like hedges your bets across how you
Right,
can still
right.
reach an audience. Um,
Yeah, there was
so I think that oh, go ahead.
oh no, I'm sorry. I could have just popped in. Sorry about that. But I was just thinking about one thing that I've been doing the influencer world for about 20 years now. So I've seen the platforms come and go, so I kind of just used to them coming and going. We started doing, VIRALBRAND, our team. We started doing influencer marketing back in the MySpace days, Joe, you know that. But we really been doing it ever since. And so this is like 2022-ish. Sorry, 2002-ish when we got started. And so we've seen the platforms come and go. It's not a surprise, but what's a surprise to me somehow is that, influencers, a lot of times they don't really own their own audience. So they spend tremendous amount of effort and time to build an audience, and they don't really try to capture email addresses. They don't try to capture a lot of data that allows them to kind of have any kind of ownership of that audience. So what they do is they just constantly are trying to grow their followers, but they have no control. So for instance, about 7 years ago, I feel like it might have been. I was talking to, I don't know if you know Heath and Zane. They were like, some of the biggest Viners. Vine kind of, was
Mm,
around for a hot minute. And I actually had him speak at a conference with me. I actually brought him into it, and I said, Zane, and I said, Zane, like we were sitting at lunch in Hollywood on Sunset Boulevard, and I was like, Zane, what's going to happen if Vine gets acquired or goes away? You've got over 500 million loops on Vine. I was like, but if Vine goes away, bro, you're screwed. You've got to try to capture some email addresses and do some stuff. Sure enough, not even a year later, Vine got acquired. I think was it by Twitter at the time? I forgot who
yep,
they acquired
correct.
them. And then they killed Vine. So, the reality is these platforms come and go. I mean, they really do. And the truth is that you really kind of need to own your own data or try to like get, a database together. And most of these influencers don't do that. So they put so much time into creating followings and all these platforms, pandering to the algorithm, trying to do all this stuff, which is all important. But capturing data, I think, is really important so that if you lose a platform, you can actually and the same thing goes for a brand. You can actually continue to follow that audience. So you really want to get real data from people. Now, there's a couple platforms that are trying to hit at that right now. One platform that this last week everybody was like flocking to, you probably remember Joe, Rednote. Everybody's like going to Rednote.
Yep.
Oh, Rednote, Rednote, Rednote. Well, you download Rednote and it's like all in Chinese and you can barely even read it. And you're like, what am I signing here? I can't even. So there's a big push to that this week. I think prior, when everybody's kind of stressed about TikTok. So who knows? I think what you're saying, Joe, is true. I think there's some instability amongst these, especially younger generation who really are kind of social natives to TikTok, who are like, whoa, hold on, I could just have all my whole following taken away in a second. So I think that there's a real desire now to diversify on whatever level because who knows what's going to happen, right? That's probably how people are feeling because for 12 hours, people who've got, I had a girl over to my house that was with my wife and I and her father. She's like a TikToker, Emily Dobson, and she was over on Saturday night, and she's got maybe 1.5 million followers, and she was like, "Ugh," she was literally showing me the screen. It was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I was
Wow.
like, "Don't worry, I'm sure you're gonna have it back by Monday." And sure enough, by Sunday morning, it was back.
Wow. Yeah, that's I can only imagine if you just have so many followers and you're just like, this is now inaccessible, at least to the
Yeah,
North American market.
yeah.
Like how devastating that must be.
Well,
Uh,
especially for like her and then also the brand, like the brands, because it's really, brand is an influencer too, right? So brands have their own influence in their following. So then, especially people who made their bread and butter off of selling on TikTok, right? So the brands and, they have followers and the influencers have followers. I think brand is just a special type of influencer, so I think that like everybody got shut down and real, scared for a second.
No, most definitely. I think one more thing I wanted to also add to this is with regards to social networks in today's age. I think a lot of people maybe are aware or unaware of like how hard it is to actually build a massive social network at scale. It was only just a few years ago that TikTok actually, wasn't um, as big of a name. Like, they started off as Musically, just known as a dancing app. And then there was a big push, at least that, we were seeing across like MightyScout itself or in across um, the general public of how do they grow beyond just dancing videos. So TikTok's one of the platforms that spent, more than $1 billion in advertising. So it does take a lot of energy to get these social networks off the ground. And just because there is some sort of new one that people flock to, the user retention on that is really low, especially if it's not optimized to capture those users. So this is a really big property that does exist. So there is a lot of weight there for it to have
Mhm.
potential staying power because there is a lot of value in it. But I think, yeah, you bring up a really good point of the diversification aspect. And when I think about brands and agencies and how, they should think about this and how they should approach this, I think we should unpack that a little bit. Like on my end, one of the things that I continually see in terms of strategies across like brands and agencies is this whole flow of working with influencers from either a seeding and gifting perspective to a, let's say they create, content, and then they see who performs well, and then evolving that to a paid partnership because they know that this certain influencer can drive like let's say sales or just is really representative of the brand in terms of the content they produce. And then lastly, getting them to a longer term partnership, whether that's an ambassadorship or an affiliate type of situation. So when it comes to TikTok and Instagram and these different platforms, as you're working with these different creators, you're going to be able to know like who has, these different platforms available to them. But then also you're going to start to build up this base of influencers that you can tap into versus if you have a strategy that is only focused on working as one-offs with different influencers and you're constantly, churning through that influencer base to actually build up this kind of snowball effect. So yeah, highly recommend it's like sticking to those fundamentals of building up a core like community and audience. Regardless of platform, like I think it's not exactly correct to not invest in, TikTok at all, because it's very likely that or there's a possibility that that will continue. But as long as you continue to build that base, those creators are creators in the end, right? Like they are going to be finding different platforms if they need to, but you're going to have that relationship with them for the very long term, so that you become a little bit more insulated from those different changes in the platform, like uh, micro, macro set of things. But yeah, curious to get your take. Like, how do you think about this? And have you heard like different questions from clients regarding this? And like, how have you spoken to them about it? And things like that.
Yeah, we have a few clients who literally put a cancel on their TikTok campaigns and said, "Hey, let's shift over to YouTube as a secondary platform, with Instagram being the primary." And I think that Instagram still is, the baseline. I don't know how you feel, Joe, but I feel like it's the baseline of just like if you're going to say a general, a general platform. Instagram's like the common denominator. And then I feel like the most of the brands are still, kind of like wanting Instagram first or Instagram and TikTok. Sometimes we get influencer, campaigns where people are wanting, TikTok influencers only. And they're like just TikTokers, and that happens, but most of the time not. But what I call, whenever we start doing, campaigns, we call this channel mapping. Okay. So whenever any new campaign that we have, whether it's a movie, film and TV, which I know that's a big niche of ours in terms of clients that we serve.
Yeah, could
Movie.
you actually expand on that? Because I don't think the audience also knows like
Oh yeah,
how big the different movies you work with and all the
yeah,
different
yeah.
productions there.
Yeah, for sure. So we've worked, going back, turning back the clock, 20 years ago, we really kind of got on the map. I was at Disney full time, the Walt Disney Company full time, and I worked in partnership marketing there and brand strategy. And so when I left, Disney, I was like, hey, I think we can create these like micro partnerships with these influencers. We didn't really even use the term influencers back then because that wasn't the term. We taught like online leaders and tastemakers, back in the day, we were kind of like, just kind of plowing the plowing through the forest and the jungle with machete. It was like brand new stuff. And so, we launched the first big one. We launched a handful of small ones, little indie movies. And the indie movies really were the first ones who would work with us because it was experimental. So the big movie studios just wouldn't touch it. It was just such brand new stuff. We're talking about blogs and message boards and MySpace and all this new stuff. And then, a lot of people thought like MySpace is for weirdos. They didn't know what that was, and they just couldn't understand it. And it didn't feel like a very brand friendly, brand safe environment. So movies were kind of a great place, indie movies. So indie movies is really how we got our start because indie movies, these guys really are in a zone where they're like, hey, we need all the help we can get. Like we don't have the big budgets the Hollywood movies and the Hollywood studios have. So after I left Disney, I went to work on these with these indie movies, and we started doing these early influencer campaigns for the movies. And so we did like all sorts of stuff that that really was cool and got a lot of great attention. But in 2003, our team launched The Passion of the Christ, which is still to this day the number one independent movie of all time. And we did it by launching it to online faith leaders. Okay. So like the church and church leaders and things like that. And so we picked a niche, right? And then we figured out the channels in which they communicate, which I always make a little joke to people. It's not that funny of a joke, but I always ask people what the first social network was. And the answer to the joke is email. Email was the first social network because it's the first time you could actually send a piece of content to a list of people and publish it to an entire list of people, 100 people, thousands of people, with the send button. So really email was where things started going viral. That's when that first started happening. And so then came, Friendster and MySpace and message boards and blogs and all that kind of stuff started percolating in and around it. But yeah, so what we think about typically is, when we answer that, kind of give you um, a longer answer to the long question, short question, is that every movie that we work on, we think, who is this movie for? What niche community is this movie for? Like, who is this for? And then we think about not just a person, but we think about an entire community. And then we kind of exhaust ourselves thinking about like what communities would really like love this movie. So when we launched the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we thought, okay, well, faith community, there's like a faith element, education community because it's a book, libraries, librarians. And then we thought through, kind of all the different angles, youth pastors, um, you know, every angle we could possibly, people who love books, book clubs, like all this stuff we thought about. So we created a list of like, and initially we created a list of like 20, and then we whittled it down to about 3 or 4 that we actually launched campaigns to. So we kind of pitched all these ideas to the head of the studio, and then we really kind of got in. And then so for a while, we kind of zoned in that niche. Now, each niche, as you say, that's why we call it channel mapping, has different channels in which they communicate. Okay, so really like if you go to like let's say a mom influencer, well back in like 2009 when we launched Tangled for Disney, after we did Narnia, then mom bloggers were the thing. In 2009, 2010, mom bloggers were like all the rage, right? And remember Twitter parties? There were Twitter parties and mom bloggers and all that stuff. That was what was going on back then. And so we were heading all that for Disney. Now, yeah, this is old school, but those channels are different now. Today, we're not launching Twitter parties. In 2025, we're not launching Twitter parties. That was 15 years ago. So yeah, so it's been really cool to be on the journey, but I'm telling you that all the platforms have changed, but it is about finding out who your niche audience is and what are the predominant ways they communicate. So another really sub niche is like fake watches, or fake Louis Vuittons or something like that. You know what I mean? Those people aren't public. They're like low pro. So you got to get onto Reddit and try to follow Reddit threads and see like where you can find a good fake watch. Now I have a real Panerai watch, but then I also don't want to lose it. So I have like, bought some knockoffs too. You know what I mean? So that I could like not worry about losing. So I've actually kind of dug into that, but I've like dug into these little micro niches. We also launched a campaign just randomly, Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and it was in and around a campaign for a procedure called well, actually, I can't remember the name of the procedure, but the procedure was focused around helping children who have colorectal incontinence due to complications from spina bifida. Okay, that is a real niche community, super niche, right? And so we launched a whole campaign for a live, this is in 2010, for a live chat with doctors. And we launched that spina bifida community worldwide and had a huge response. And it was an incredibly successful campaign and fun. But the thing was it was email and Facebook at the time. That was where we focused all of our effort. Not even
Mhm.
and then some microblogs too. So, every year it's different and every platforms evolve and all that stuff. So I think that, the key takeaway is over time it changes. And also when you think about the community, think about what channels, what platforms the communities are using to communicate on.
That's awesome. I think like it's great that you've literally been in this space for more than the past like 20 years and seen that evolution, like you said, from just email. because yeah, when it comes to these shifting platforms, you've seen multiple of them. So that's like
Yep.
extremely relevant. This is probably, of course, the biggest one because it's such a popular platform. But yeah, I think that that's highly relevant for people.
Yeah, I do
And
remember a little bit too back when Hollywood just it didn't seem that long ago, about 8 years ago, when the guys in Musically were trolling around parties trying to meet influencers, and they're handing out their Musically business cards, and everybody's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna put that in my pocket, in my back pocket." You know what I mean? It was just sort of like, these guys weren't that popular at parties. But then stuff shifted and it went off with a bang. Really, I'm sure you remember during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, but the pandemic really pushing it hard, and part of which, because TikTok's a partner of ours, I know, I could tell you because I've sat down in meetings with them, and one of the first things they ever said to me in their meeting in their New York headquarters was they said, we don't see ourselves as a social network, we see ourselves as an entertainment platform. So they really know who they are. They're thinking like that's how they thought. And we're shifting because we helped launch TikTok Shop. And so, and that was that meeting probably 3 years ago. And we were working on this 2.5 years ago. And, they were shifting their thinking to go, yes, we're an entertainment platform, but now we're a sales channel. And so they're kind of shifting their thoughts back then to that. But they've launched with very clear in mind. They shifted from just a music over to just an entertainment platform.
I think that's a yeah, good place for us to also kind of switch gears there. But before we do, there's two questions that I wanted to cover from the audience. So Emily's asked, if brands only grow relationships with small group of influencers and don't do one-off partnerships, how can they reach new audiences? So I think, yeah, let's unpack that one a little bit. I'll just share a quick note on that. I think with like any marketing activity or initiative, you ultimately, I think of like the 80/20 principle where you have a core of what you focus on and then you're experimenting with different people. So the one-off partnerships, I think, are a lot of what your time will be spent on, but you ultimately are funneling a lot of that activity to find the people that you want to work with for the long term. So if you start with, 10 one-offs per month, then hopefully you're finding maybe two or three people that you can continue to work with ongoing. So bulk of your effort is going to happen on that one-off area because it's so rinse like repeat versus once you start building up that base, then that one is like a ambassador program. People are aware of like every month I need to post X number of times or affiliate, I get these amounts of commissions. So that one starts to run on autopilot. So for example, we've spoken with different teams, and that was one of the strategies that Bolt used to do this at scale with just two people. So there's like a case study that we did where they were able to work with over 500 creators with just two people on the team. And that's because they build up this system of working with these people as a one-off, but then find a way to funnel them into an overall program because then that self-runs without as much the management overhead. But yeah, curious how you view it as well, Rick.
Yeah, I think it's exactly really well said, Joe. I think a lot of times, influencers and agencies and PR firms wind up working with a small stable of influencers. I usually say that, a PR agent, a publicist, typical publicist has about 100 good contacts. Typically a publicist has a niche that they serve, like, whatever their niche is, entertainment publicist or business publicist. So they kind of niche out, but they usually have about, in their back pocket about 100 good contacts, and they make their entire careers out of 100 good contacts, and then they kind of just repitch those people, and those people change jobs and whatever. And that's been true. Again, that's my opinion, but that's been true for, the last 20 years since I've been watching publicists. They just always pitch the same people. They got good relationships and they get some press hits. The same is true in the influencer world. What happens is a lot of agencies have the same influencers that they go back to over and over and over again for brands. And then brands, if they're activating influencers themselves, they go back to the same ones over and over again. Now, why is that? Probably because laziness, to be honest, and predictability. They start to know they know a person. They don't want to get outside their comfort zone. They know this influencer is gonna perform. They know they can trust the content. And then also like there's a, it's a little bit of a scary business, right? But when you have influencers posting, you have some scary situations where you've got a new influencer that you don't know yet. And if they post and things go awry, or they have a bad post, or there's like they, get blacklisted, or sometimes what happens is in the influencer community, you find other influencers who don't like that influencer. And so what happens is they'll come after them and hit them hard, And so I think they'll go after the brand and say, stop working with this person. This person's horrible, like, and they'll actually make the brand scared and the brand will get scared. And then they'll get blacklisted from the brand, So that's like there's all these things, that people have to keep in mind. But the 80/20 rule, I think, is really, really true for most of these brands. Now, my opinion is the better way to do it is to find your 80/20 rule, to take the same thought, the same concept, and apply it a little bit differently. But basically, the 80/20 rule here is going to be applied to say, like, hey, let's pretend I'm a brand and I'm working on a campaign. Let's say I'm doing the campaign for a brand because we're a full service agency where we do full service campaigns. So if I'm going to do this, then I would say, okay, I'm going to activate 100 influencers. And of those 100 influencers, I'm going to say now 20, the 80/20 rule, 20 are going to give me the best clicks, the best engagement, the best content, etc. 80/20 rule. The other 80, let's put them on the side, not reactivate them, right? Let's take them and actually let's go to, let's say that happens in January, right? So let's go into February. So in February, we should reactivate those 20 influencers that performed really well and make them, I'm going to flag them. I'm going to click, I'm going to tag them in my CRM as an ambassador or affiliate, right? So I'm going to reapproach them to reactivate them because I know they performed well for that brand. And so we're going to have a separate value proposition, right? A separate offer for that influencer because we know they're high performers. And so what the brand should really do, whether it's us doing it for them or the brand, is keep those 20 and then find a new 80 the next month. And then keep on building
Yep.
like what you're saying. So I think that's the logical and right path. But the problem is that most brands don't really have the patience. A lot of brands don't have the patience. If they don't see immediate gratification, like it was a paid ad, they kind of they don't really commit to influencers or what they're doing, or they kind of stay in a smaller sandbox that's safe. So that's sad to see because the reality is like if they just stick to the strategy, it's logical, it makes sense. What we're talking about now. If they just stick to it over time, they're going to build a network of like 500, 1,000 power influencers that really change the game for their brand.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of teams actually underestimate how much time it takes to build out influencer programs. Like if we the way we view it is if you don't have at least like a part-time or dedicated team member, then you're likely underinvesting in your ability to do that continuously because it is a lot of back and forth, let's say communication, following up, because you are dealing with, a variety of different people that have different communication styles and like trying to build that up. But that I think really speaks to the importance of building out some sort of longer term program where that becomes much more repeatable in a sense.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
that makes a lot of sense. I think that brands just get a little, just I understand that just they kind of just get a little scared. They don't they're scared of spending the money. They're kind of feel a loss of control with the influencer. There's just so many question marks that it's, most brand managers have a job and a boss. And so they're putting their neck on the line, to when they're doing these campaigns, so they're one influencer who posts the wrong thing or is, in a cancel culture list or something like that, who knows what's going to happen? Like that's scary for a brand, that's very scary for a brand. So they want to make sure they make the right decisions and they have an agency or a platform that can help them make those choices safe as possible.
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And with regards to the well, I guess kind of I think a lot of this speaks a little bit to the ROI of that. It's like a risk assessment of, releasing control to the different influencers. Wanted to transition a little bit to going over that aspect of things. Like how do you kind of think about that or explain that to brands when they approach you? Like if they're unsure of like, what's the ROI of these influencer efforts, or how do you do, let's say, reporting on how that's happened? Like, how do you think about that in general?
Yeah, first of all, like, we have a stack of software that we use, which MightyScout is a part of. Kind of got like about 6 or 7 different pieces of software that we use in our campaigns. And MightyScout's a real important one. So just if anybody is thinking about using MightyScout, you should. But we use it for various things. We actually don't use it as our full stack. We use it as part of our stack, and kind of created our little secret sauce, so to speak. But the thing that I think is important, and by the way, I think Mighty Scout can be used as a full stack if you don't, if you have you could build a whole strategy around it, of course. Um, but anyway, so I think that what you have to what the way that I, tell, I guess, explain it to people that we're working with is that, you know, most people at this point understand funnel marketing. That's kind of a thing that's been out for a while in digital marketing and a funnel. Well, I think of like influencer marketing as having its own funnel. We look at it as a funnel as well. And the top of that funnel is awareness driven, and the bottom of that funnel is sales driven, right? So do you get some sales when you're doing awareness level of the funnel? Yes. Do you get more sales and more conversions that you're looking for when you get to the bottom part of the funnel? Yes. So the very bottom of this funnel, what we see is like a 5 to 20x ROI if you do things the right way. If you commit to, finding a niche community, getting influencers at scale, posting, taking the 80/20 rule, being consistent over time, taking that 80/20 rule, find those 20 that work really well, pull them down to the affiliate level, and then they continue to build that network of these affiliate ambassadors, right? But continue to pump new people, finding new people, because you're committed to, let's say, the mom community, right? Over time, you've built this badass mom community, pardon my PG, but you built this badass mom influencer network that you've built over the course of a year because you've kept on keeping those 20% each month and rolling them over, right? And keeping those relationships and finding new influencers. So the new influencers are still great. The other 80% are still getting engagement. And then what a lot of people don't remember or don't think about is the algorithm impact. Because when you've got a lot of different influencers posting, even if they don't get the sales you're looking for, you've got social media content out there that's impacting the algorithm for your brand. But not only just that, but it's also impacting, well, the algorithm is big enough in its own right, but it's also impacting social SEO because what's happening now is, especially Z and Gen Zers, they're not going to Google and doing search anymore. They're doing social search. They're actually looking to see what's going on with this brand in their search in their social search bar, right? They're on Instagram, they're on TikTok, and they're looking up that brand there. They're not going to see the Yelp score. They're not going to see the Google reviews. They're actually going, old people do that. The younger people are going to see what people are saying, right? They're going to see what people are saying, right? And so that's really the key. So there's these really huge, things that are very valuable at the top of the funnel that are not just awareness, but they actually have a lot of great features that are super important if you want to be successful in the social media sphere. And in the bottom of that funnel, what is that? The brand ambassadors and what else? Whitelisting. So you find those people, those brand ambassadors, those top performers, and that's where you're going to get down and say, okay, we want to drive sales. Who do you drive sales with? Brand ambassadors, affiliates, whitelisting, and you're probably going to whitelist with an affiliate or maybe a celebrity, a macro influencer. However, I'll tell you, one of our top influencers on TikTok Shop, she had 8,000 followers, and I saw her do a 20-minute TikTok Shop live video, and she had $30,000 of sales in 20 minutes. So, and she was literally had a background more boring than my background right now. It was like literally she had a little light kit and a pod and a camera, and she was literally poorly. It wasn't even that. It was not fancy. It's not fancy. She's what we call a grassroots influencer, a nano influencer, right? We kind of break our influencers up into two big classifications, grassroots and premium. So grassroots would be like nano micro influencers, low level micros, high level micros over here with the, so these micro influencers have power. And so there's all sorts of value there. But bottom of that funnel, you really want to start, you want to amplify, right? You want to amplify content that's working well. You want to amplify those influencers who are performing well. And that's where you get to the bottom of this funnel conversion where you see that 5 to 20x a lot of people talk about when they say that. But a lot of brands, I met a guy in the steam room at my country club this week, and he had a wine brand, and this guy just wasn't listening. He was like, whatever, older dude, and he had dabbled in influencer marketing and didn't see sales. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, well, try to explain it to him. And he was just like, yeah. He just shook his head and he's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna stick with what works for me. So,
That
he's missing the fruit. He's missing the fruit.
That's yeah, I think that's a very common starting point for a lot of people. And I think that's with a variety of channels too, like where you try maybe one or two things and then you're like, oh, I guess this doesn't really work for me. And it's like, I don't know, with starting anything in life, like probably not gonna be that good at it the first time.
Totally.
But yeah, like to add to what you've said, I do agree that breakdown of awareness to like direct conversion is important for people to be aware of. And I've seen some interesting things like with clients in terms of how they think about this. Um, so a couple of things like impression share is a concept that Google Ads uses. So how much of the available, ways that people can see you, what percentage of that um, are you in? So when it comes to impressions, like understanding maybe your total market and saying, yeah, how many impressions are we getting? Each month or each year. So I've seen teams actually look at this across a variety of different channels, not just influencer, but PR and things like that. And um, this is all awareness level, right? Because let's say, for example, you only get 1,000 impressions a month, then your awareness isn't really growing. Unless, so you being able to track that and how that's growing is a way that you can at least start to communicate to either execs and the team, like, hey, these efforts are increasing at least the awareness of our company and our products. So when it comes to actual data and analytics, you can use that. But the problem, of course, with impressions is there's still really high level metrics like that doesn't exactly correlate to the bottom line like in a very clean way. So I would say like that's like a starting point that I would recommend looking at because it's one of the like easiest. So um other kind of tactics and things I've seen people do is when it comes to selecting influencers, they will look at the average views that they expect an influencer will have. So that can let you forecast and predict if we work with 10 influencers, our average views is this, 10 times this is that, then we expect to get this many views and this many impressions. So then you can start to hit maybe some of the goals because some teams work off of an impression number as a quarterly, metric that they need to hit or yearly. And what's nice about impressions is when it comes to different marketing channels, whether that's TV, radio, and all sorts of other ad approaches, then you can start to compare influencer with those channels and understand the CPMs. Like TV, of course, is going to be extremely high CPM, but with influencer, what we typically see is teams start to see really low CPM. So that's a $10 per 1,000 impressions is how that's typically calculated on average. And some people are seeing, as you mentioned, right, with someone who had 8,000 followers, they were able to drive, 30,000 sales. They're probably reaching a lot of people, even though they had a small following. Like the
Yep.
following is like in this day and age with social networks, we shouldn't be really looking at that, but the actual number of views that people are getting, you can start to triangulate that into a metric, which is your CPM. So TikTok, some people are seeing 50-cent CPMs, $1 CPMs. Like that's like unheard of across like
Right.
any advertising
Yeah.
channel. But you also have to add in the labor that it takes to achieve that because you have to communicate with influencer, that takes time of your
Yeah.
team. But now you can look at 50 cents or $1 CPM and compare that across your other marketing channels. And then now okay, this is driving impressions and awareness at a much cheaper rate than these other efforts. So that's like just one small way to look at it. And there's a variety of different pieces
Yeah, that's a
through
great.
that.
And by the way, Joe, you've done a great job with your platform tracking these metrics, and we use you guys for that. We track all of our influencers' metrics, and so that's really important for us to be able to analyze. And on a high level, we're not logging into their account and having a deeper level ambassador relationship. At least on a high level, those influencers, you guys are able to track that. And so we can keep, some of that data at least in a high level, and have a firm understanding of what really happened on the campaign. And we don't have to go back to the influencer's account and count by hand like we used to 10 years ago, mainly because your platform actually does that for us. So thank you. And we used to have to calculate back in the blogger days. We go back and see what their unique monthly views were on a blog and check their UVMs, and then see what their unique monthly views were, plus their social media, to get a view of what their reach was, so we could actually calculate the total impression. Not just even 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, when bloggers were still around, and still, kind of king of the hill, so to speak, in the social world. Because it used to be that bloggers were the main thing for a while, and they used their social media to promote their blog. So their social media was secondary to their blog. It was just a tool to promote their blog, because that's how they made their money. It was all based on the blog. So we do blogger campaigns, and then their influencer accounts, so to speak, their social accounts were just sort of a throw-in. So we had to be like, okay, what's the unique monthly view in their blogs, the UVM, get those metrics, and then what is they're following on Twitter, which are following on Facebook. So we had to look at all the platforms to try to calculate. There's a lot of work. So you made that job a lot easier for me. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Really good to hear that, because yeah, that is a
Yeah,
lot of manual work, with especially with the spreadsheets and all of that.
no doubt.
But it's very, of course, very important, because like that's the type of stuff that really helps the execs and the team understand the value without having to purely see like the ROI at the dollar level. Not to say that that's not important, but I think there's steps to this whole ROI thing, which is
Yep.
how do you continue to work your way down to helping people see how that fully connects.
100%.
Um,
You have to like realize that on each level of the funnel, there's different KPIs that are relevant, right? Like, so in your top of the funnel, you're talking more CPM, which is cost per thousand, right? The cost per thousand of impressions, right? So your cost per thousand of impressions, but I'm sorry, take that back. Cost per thousand reached. So that's an important note, right? Because when you say their reach is cost per thousand, the reach doesn't necessarily mean that it was an impression. So a CPM is like, okay, cost per thousand. That's important to note that, because then they might say, how many impressions did you get? How many impressions? And so that's going to be on a potential, like the CPM is going to be on a potential. In impressions, you can actually like really measure when it comes to a digital ad, based on how many people actually clicked on this content and saw it. So that's a little bit of a different story depending on what question you're really asking. And when you get into paid ads, when you kind of get down that level, you're even paying an influencer more because they're an ambassador and affiliate, then you could ask them for higher level of visibility on those metrics. But for influencers on the top of the funnel, we don't usually ask for that level. We're trying to get hundreds of influencers posting, and then we find the ones on a high level that we're tracking in the MightyScout software to see who's got the best performance. Then we take the lever down a couple layers down the funnel. Now, these people are spending more serious money, have a more serious partnership with. We're asking for higher level visibility on their metrics, and actually back end permissions to be able to see, their real metrics, right? Top of the funnel, we don't really mess with that too much because we're usually doing smaller offers. But as you kind of get down to more serious or celebrity level posts, with their celebrity, you're spending real money. And at that point, you want to go with, you want to get as much visibility as you can. If you're spending, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions with a partnership.
oh, most definitely. I think the celebrity one is a interesting topic. I feel like I'm curious from your end, like what is that like, working with different celebrity influencers, or like how do you even think about that, or how do these movie companies like uh strategize like with that? Like it's a very like fascinating area of influencer, because yeah, we work a lot with like micros and like nanos. Just curious to hear how that
Yeah,
breaks down.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think like, what's nice for us is that we have good relationships with a lot of celebrities because I've been in Hollywood for 25 years. So that's cool. We got like, you know, people I could call on speed dial and be like, "Hey, I need to get a post. Can I Venmo you right now?" Stuff like that. And it's nice to have those relationships because like what we're able to do is cut around the talent and talent managers. And so, a lot of times, especially for some more informal posts versus a major partnership, I could send out a text message and get some posts up pretty quick, in kind of a semi-organic way, Instagram story. But if it's going to be a major, major partnership, obviously you're going to get the agents or managers involved at some level, even if they're friends, because then eventually they'll work. Now, here's the trick. When it comes to Hollywood celebrities, we're talking real money. We're not talking about influencer managers. We're talking about real money. We're talking about William Morris, Endeavor. We're talking about Creative Artists Agency. We're talking about these major, major, major agencies that run Hollywood. And these guys do not care about a $10,000 post. They're not going to lift their finger. Like I had to call Scott Disick's manager last year. And like, yeah, minimum post, was like, I can't remember the real number, but I'm just going to call it like $250,000. You know what I mean? If he's going to do a post, it's $250,000 minimum. Again, I don't quote me on that because I can't remember the real number, but it was big, you know what I mean? And you'd expect it to be big. But because you think about it like this, their manager has to write up a contract, their agent has to write up a contract. And what are they going to get paid? 10%? So what are they making? They're making like so sometimes a celebrity is totally down to do a post for 10 grand. They actually are because it's 10 grand, just 10 grand in their pocket. I'm going to Venmo them 5 grand. You know what I mean? Like it's a quick 5 grand, but their managers don't want to have to lift a finger on a 10 grand post. Why? What's the manager going to make? $1,000? Not worth his time. And if you know anything about business, and Joe, it's probably true for you, I'd imagine, because anybody's been in the business world knows sometimes the smallest clients are the biggest problems. The smallest clients are like, they come to you and give you all they have. They're two shiny nickels. And they're like, make magic happen for two shiny nickels. You know what I mean? And then what happens is like, because they don't have enough money to really play the game, or they don't have like whatever the deal is, then they wind up getting disappointed on some level because there's the only way they could be disappointed because you're not a magician. You can't, for two shiny nickels, launch a full campaign. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, we could do what we could do, and here's what we can do, and we'll promise you that, but can't promise that. So the same thing is true with these celebrities because these celebrities, if you've got a little back door, you can get in and get for 10 grand and get a post or 5 grand, get a post. I do it all the time. So I have like these great celebrity relationships where I'm like, hey, do me a favor, do me a solid, and we just kind of do go off brand for their management firms and they don't even tell them about it. It's like it turns into a nice Instagram story post or something casual. But if it turns into like it has a lot of visibility, their managers are gonna be like, hey, where's my cut of that? What is that? So that's fun. The other thing is that now in Hollywood, more and more you're finding filmmakers choosing, especially for indie films, but in general, choosing people who have high social status, who actually have good followings, because they're looking at that and thinking, okay, this person has a big following, they can help me market my movie. So if they're going to be, I'm going to hire them as an actor because they're in my movie, but get a message from, I don't know if Top Notch Idiots, those guys, I don't know if you know Top Notch. Those guys are great. Top Notch Gang, the really, really funny YouTubers. But like Opto's like, sent me a message, nothing private, but he sent me a message. He was like, hey, I'd love to be an actor, who do you know, and whatever. So I think a lot of these influencers, want to be, have desire to be, on the other side of the business, so to speak, be on the bigger screens. And rightfully so. There's these people like Opto are like super talented. But on the other side of it, the studios are expecting these influencers who own their own audience to get the word out. Now, when I started in this business, the celebrities had no connection to their audience. 20 years ago, the celebrities had, well, longer, 90s, the thing is they started this like, around 2000. They had no connection to their audience. They did not own their audience at all. They even on like Facebook, even though you don't technically, or Instagram or TikTok, they don't technically own that audience, but they have followers, right? So, but back then they didn't have any ability to reach their audience. They just relied on publicists and movie studios to make them famous. So that was like a whole different ballgame. Now that's all shifted over all these years, and now the studios are expecting them and wanting them to be a part of that game. So it's cool. It's really, it's really fun to be a part of that. Now we worked with, like, let's say Kim Kardashian on a campaign, and which we have, and then we work with Kim K. She's got a bunch of influencers who follow her, right? So we're scraping, hey, who are her influential, notable followers, right? And so we're finding out who all her influential, notable followers are, and we're launching to Kim K fans first, influencers who follow Kim K first as an influencer community, right? Because that's a layer down the pyramid, so to speak. If Kim's at the top of this pyramid of fashion, let's say fashion and beauty, then the next layer down are all these girls and guys who follow her. You know what I mean? So you like, who are they? Let's reach out to them, right away. Because if we get Kim K on board, then they're going to be easier to get on board, right? Because they follow her and like her and admire her. So yeah, it's a fun. The celebrity business is fun, and there's more value though every day to people understanding the value of micro influencers, and we've really broken up those two categories of, like I said before, grassroots influencers and premium influencers, just so that our clients understand the values of each and the difference.
Yeah, I think the what you mentioned with the celebrity influencers kind of creating is they almost create this like halo effect of like awareness with the other influencers who then are more willing to maybe promote a product or something like that. Like
100%.
that's what I've heard.
Yep.
Teams will use like macros as a strategy to start to help activate the micros as well because they're more
It's
aware
fish
of like
bait.
this is a legit thing.
Fish bait.
That's yeah, that's a good way to put
Yeah, yeah.
it.
But what happens is when you reach out to these, we started doing this during the Passion Days. We, like, back when our team launched the Passion of the Christ, like, it was like, hey, how do we need to create a list of really major leaders in the faith community who are on board, and then we need to kind of brag about that list to all these other influencers to let them know that it's safe. It's safe to get on board. It also elevates it to a certain status, right? So when you activate a celebrity, you just know the status of this campaign is bigger, right? Because there's all
Mhm.
these brands that are out there who got, like, some candle brand who's reaching out to micro influencers. I get, Joe, you probably get hit on your own personal IG all the time or whatever. And like when, like, they're asking me, they're pitching me, someone's pitching me, not knowing who I really even am and what I do. They're just pitching me as an influencer because I've got 15,000 followers myself. I don't even care about that because the only audience I really care about is influencers and brands. So I'm fine having a smaller IG, not even trying to blow it up. But I want to make sure that those 15,000 are influencers and brands. You know what I mean? If that's in my friends. So I'm cool with all that. Never really try to go beyond that. But I think the main thing is, I think it's just like, you really want to get you really want to get heavy influencers at like a premium, but like a smaller level. You do not need 10 celebrities on board or 100 celebrities on board. Most cost effective, you're going to get a few. Now, if you remember back in the day, what was that campaign that was for that music festival, Fire Festival? Remember that?
Oh yeah, Fire Festival. Yeah.
Fire Festival. Now they got a bunch of influencers, the heavy influencers on board and posting. That was a kind of a cool strategy. And then everybody's just going out of their minds wild. If you got a big budget, do it. You know what I mean? If you got a bunch to burn and you want to get, like, you pick your niche community and get it. My biggest recommendation is always just pick your niche. If you want to go viral, pick the niche you want to go viral in. Because you just aren't going to go generally viral. Yeah, maybe you'll get lucky, but if you want to go viral, pick that niche. Do you want to go viral with moms? Do you want to go viral with beauty influencers? Do you want to go viral, and stick to that strategy because eventually it'll start to go.
Yeah, I mean, it creates like an echo chamber because these all of these platforms are now very algorithmic, right? It's the For You page is the new
Yep.
dominant form of like distributing media. So then the more that you focus on that one niche, the more that people who engage with this type of content are going to see that content. So it really actually feeds into how the platforms fundamentally work. So
Yep.
yeah, I think that that makes complete sense.
Yeah, I got like 15,000 followers on my personal IG. My average views on my content is about 25,000, and only about 5% of
Yep.
those people are my audience. I'm
It's
like,
wild, right?
who are these people?
Yeah. It's
Yeah, I'm like, who
crazy.
are these people that are like seeing my content? I don't know who they are, but hey, welcome to the party. But it's funny because sometimes I'm like, should I go private with my IG so the people I want to see my content are seeing it? But then the algorithm is sort of like really matching that content to people who really want to see that content. So, especially with TikTok, I mean, their algorithm's king. There's nobody's
Yeah.
gonna out like TikTok's algorithm. What's
Oh,
that one
definitely.
platform that there's been a lot of people shifting to where you actually can own your own audience? What is it, like a blue sky?
Blue Sky? Yeah.
Yeah, blue sky. I think their value proposition is that you can actually own your audience.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Yeah,
so
because I think it's gonna maybe be more portable or something. I'm not too sure.
yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see if they have like a response, to that. But it doesn't. I've created an account a while ago. It didn't seem like this. I'm not hearing a lot about it, but I remember when they first came out. As soon as I hear about a new platform, I quickly like download it and start messing around with it so I can understand it. But
No, definitely. I feel like that's something that I have also created an account on to check out. And yeah, these new platforms are coming up with different ways to engage with users or to like different value props that I think over time will build up and then that becomes a new norm. Like that's exactly how
yeah,
these all these other platforms start to adopt it. So I know that we are close to time, but there's there's a little bit of QA. Like if anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in. Like we will try to get to all of those questions, at least by the end. And I think at least doing one more topic on AI could be a good way to jump off. We can of course expand upon this in like the future. I think that there's definitely a lot of room there. So we just do a little bit of yeah, like curious to get your take on should people start to work with AI influencers or what things are looking like with regards to actually let's just start there before we just get too broad. Yeah, how do we even think about AI influencers?
so for me, I actually am curious what your thoughts are, but for me, I kind of don't really care, in the sense of what kind of influencer they are. If they're creating great content that has the niche community that they're targeting engaged, and they actually, there's still a human that's behind them, right? I mean, there's still a human that's actually like that's behind those AI influencers. They might be using AI for the content, whatever. There's an influencer, there's a human behind them that I could do a deal with. You know what I mean? And we can actually could do, a payment for a post or a trade post or whatever. So I think that, in some ways, the AI influencers are going to be interesting in the sense that they're predictable. They actually have like a little bit more brand. You can put more brand strategy and predictability behind these influencers, and they don't have a personal life that could be a threat to a brand. Some of these personal decisions they make or whatever. So I think there's actually like, there's a lot of potential in the AI world with influencers, and I'm definitely not knocking that at all. I think it's great. I kind of welcome to the party. Over 20 years of doing this now, and I'm like every different phase of this, I've always been like, welcome to the party. I think that some of the guys who've been in the game early, like I was, are all gone now. I don't even know of anybody who's still in the game as long as I've been in the game. Maybe they're out there, but I haven't seen them. I don't know them. Because most of the guys I worked with didn't adapt to change and sort of like welcome new platforms and new techniques and new strategies. And I was always like, I would just be a super ADHD guy, just interested like a little squirrel with a nut on anything new. I'm like, oh, what's that? Oh, this is cool. Oh, that's tasty. What's going on here? What's that? What's going on? And I think that a lot of these other firms have built themselves like MightyScout, but not MightyScout, right? They built their whole platform around Instagram and TikTok, right? And then around certain platforms, and then things shifted and they just got exhausted. They sold and they didn't want to keep up with the times and just keep strategy. Now, because we're an agency, we've always just used new tools all the time. So we just never got stuck using the platform that we created. Where when things shifted, we didn't care. We're like throughout that platform, hold a new platform. We're constantly iterating our stack, so to speak, right? So everything that we're interested in, all new things. Yeah, I mean, like I could have easily like thrown in the towel after like our bigger blogger network. We had a massive blogger network and all these bloggers, and like I got a company that I was, you might even remember them, BlogFrog, like they were huge back in the game. They did a great job. BlogFrog was around for a while and then they had to exit. And then some of those, then they kind of, all iterated, but they didn't keep up with the times, didn't want to keep up with the times, sold, cashed out, whatever. So I think that, and just went on to something else. They're like, "Ah, I'm over it." They're like, I'm over, but I'm not. I'm far from over it. I love it. I'm like excited about it. So welcome AI influencers in my mind, and there's benefits to it.
Hmm.
However, I will say I don't think that AI influencers are new to the game. I don't think they're taking the game over. And I think that your average Joe nano influencer, who's just feels like a regular mom, a regular person filming content, is like, hey moms, I'm out here and I just tried this thing and it feels so authentic and so real and like no filters, hashtag no filters. Where they're not even, it's not even doctored content, and they're not a premium influencer who's so fancy. They're just their content feels so real, and that content, Joe, I'm sure you know better than anybody knows that it works. That kind of nano influencer, micro influencer content that feels real, it works for their normal posts, but it also works with paid ads. If you paid attention at all this Christmas to your Instagram or TikTok feed, you saw the Spark ads and all the ads behind the influencer content in the micro influencer content. I'm talking like normal looking mom, who's just living her daily life and not even heavily editing the video. So yeah, so I think that's gonna, I think that there's room at the table for the AI influencer, but I don't think they're taking over.
Yeah, I think like when I think a lot about the AI influencers, like I agree with you that there is a really interesting aspect to that kind of grassroots content and like what feels familiar. Like that's always like something that's relatable to people since it's like something that they maybe can imagine themselves doing. I think when it comes to the AI influencers, there's a variety of different flavors of what that will look like, which is I think crazy to think about. So some analogies that I like to think about are when it comes to, let's say, meme pages, like those aren't exactly like, people, they're just like a media company. Like you assume, of course, people are behind it because that's how things work today. But in the future, if that thing is just pulling content from all sorts of different places. It doesn't need to be run by a person. So, but like you said, if it's following in your niche, like if it's in the faith niche, it's like, hey, this is still getting eyeballs because it's putting in this content that then drives impressions. So we would still want to work with it. And what's crazy in this world is like it's very possible that that AI influencer an account will just be able to directly transact with you, which is kind of wild to think about since there's no person exactly behind it, but you're like, hey, it's fitting this niche. So
Yeah,
like,
especially like commenting and engagement. But I do wonder, then you have like AI battling AI because these social networks who don't want to let non-humans take over their social networks and all their accounts because that kind of could be bad for them and on a number of levels.
well,
So then you got like I would imagine you basically got like even like me, like I don't even know why, but like I'll get like Instagram, I'm just doing normal posts and I'm just like a very normal account. And I get these things saying, it looks like you have automation going on your account. And I'm like, I don't have any automation going on my account. Like I don't even know what that means. Like, what do you mean? I don't have any, I'm not doing any automation. So I think they're always looking for automation and things, Instagram and these social networks just don't want to, and these platforms don't want that heavy automation. It's not welcome, in a lot of ways. So it's going to be interesting to see. Now, maybe that'll shift. Maybe they'll be like, "Ooh, who cares? I don't know.
yeah, I mean, because the thing is, a lot of the social networks optimize for engagement in the end of the day.
Right.
So like I think again, thinking through like some of the analogies of the past as the Instagram platform has evolved or as even the Facebook platform has evolved, it went from like a following friends algorithm to a for you. So the for you, there, I mean, there's continuing trying to inject posts that are suggested from people you didn't even follow because it knows that you're engaging with this content. So I think like with with that trend continuing, then it's only a matter of time of these are just random accounts that like you assume that they're all real, right? Because they are people, but at the end of the day, it's just content being created by someone. So I think like AI, of course, there's probably going to be some sort of evolution to how that plays out, where initially it's going to be, of course, the same content creators and they're like creating maybe even more content with AI. But then I do think with that optimization for engagement that I mean a good example of this is if you just click your explore page, right? And you just see these pictures of, I mean, everyone has different explore page, but I have like pictures of food. You of course assume that that's real. But at the end of the day, like you click in, and if you think about like who's the last person you clicked into, like I don't even know the username of this person. I don't know if it was a man or like a woman, right? If it's content that's not, of them. So yeah, there is something kind of happening there where who makes the content, um, maybe, from an AI perspective, that could be, but when it comes to engaging with that person, that's where it's different, right? Because then,
Yeah.
um, if you are actually speaking with them, or for example, I have like a nephew who was listening to someone on like, I think it was like TikTok Live or like Instagram Live, and they shouted out that person's name during that live cast, and like that really resonated with that person. So, I mean, with AI, it's tricky because you feel like you could do like so many different things eventually in the
Yeah,
future,
yeah.
but like there is that nature to it where it still can be personal when you're communicating maybe one to one, or it feels like you're one to one.
Yeah, I think anything. We're in the world now, back in the Wild West again, where anything is possible. They had these major iterations in my career anyway, from like Web 1.0. It's right when I started my career, it was during the millennium shift, right? And so that's, when I was at Disney and I was there for a chunk of time watching that happen, being in the middle of that. So many Disney executives were leaving for the dot-com boom, and that was the thing. And then, Web 2.0 hits, right? And then that's the, social network where it's like, instead of people to content, it's content to the people, right? That was the shift. Instead of people to
Mhm.
content, come to websites, Web 1.0, content to the people. It's now coming to my feed, right? Via friends, right? But now the For You
UGC, you can
page
create it.
for
Yeah.
you and now algorithm and stuff like that. And then really, now we're in the next big phase, right? So I've been here for three big chunks of this now. And that big phase is AI. And so here we are on AI and see where that journey is going to lead. So super cool. I'm down. I use AI like every hour for some reason,
Yeah.
especially copywriting and stuff like that, and just polishing. I'm so lazy now. I'm getting like AI to do. ChatGPT is like best friend. Or it's there's all sorts of fun things now. I think um the truth is that there's still, I just don't imagine AI is going to take over the social networks. I know it's about the content. Now, people might be using AI to create great content and better content that's more engaging. There's still someone that has to own that account. Unless there's going to be these farms and these bot farms that are out there and all that stuff's going on and still going on. But I think these social networks are still, and these platforms are going to be trying to fight that all the time. And they keep like real people there, even though it's really still, like you said, about eyeballs on content and the discover page and giving me content that I like. But I think that people will still be the core and community. Um, but they're getting pretty good, I gotta admit. Like I reached out to Lululemon because I had a sales clerk who was like real bozo, And so I reached out to Lululemon, and they clearly on their chat had AI already plugged in, because I reached out to make a little complaint about this Lululemon in Henderson, Nevada. Just it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just that I was annoyed. And they literally started writing me back right away, and I'm like, this is like too good. But they sound great and they're saying all the right things. But I was like, I'm obviously talking to AI right now. And I was pretty
Yeah.
impressed. I was like, and I would never really know it was AI unless I just knew the industry and what was going on. And I was like, does it really matter? Like, yeah, this AI is never going to do anything with my complaint. They're just trying to make me feel better. They're not, you know what I mean? I was like, I kind of like, but they could probably trick somebody else.
Oh
But
yeah.
I don't know how people are gonna know they're talking to AI. My sister-in-law said that she thought AI was a great therapist. She said she talked to AI about her relationship for 5 hours.
Wow, 5 hours.
Yeah, 5 hours. I was like, really? Five
Oh
hours?
wow.
She's like, yeah, I just literally just kept on doing that. It was literally like a full-on therapist conversation. She's like, best therapist I ever had. So I,
Ooh, that's yeah, it's super interesting. Like, I mean, I've seen like different cases where you can talk to AI. I didn't realize people were talking to it for like 5 hours straight,
well,
but
she so
that's pretty crazy.
she's a star of a soap opera called Young and the Restless, and she was the star of
Mm,
another TV show called 90210. And so they get time, when they're on sets. So you go into a green room, so in between shoots. So when you're in between a shoot, like you just sit in a green room, and I don't know how actors do it,
mm,
production people do it, because it's the most boring thing in between cuts. I mean, like when things are live and being shot, it's like literally not even 5% of what's going on there is actually shooting, and the 95% is waiting and hanging out. Oh my gosh, I don't know how people do it. I'd lose my mind. So, but hence
uh,
she's got the time to talk to ChatGPT about a relationship for 5 hours. I'm not,
well,
I'm not saying her name. I'm not going to out her formally, but if you looked it up, they figure it out.
well, yeah, I feel like we could definitely expand on this like in the future with different uh talks that we'll do together. But I think one last thing I want to go over is some of the different questions to make sure we cover all of them here. So just to get this last one is when it comes to people shifting, let's say, from TikTok to, YouTube, so like these other platforms, um, do you actually have any general thoughts on like shadow banning or anything like that?
Um, so as far as shadow banning goes, do I feel like that's a separate topic than people shifting to other platforms. I
Yeah,
feel like those are kind of two topics. But what do you
yeah.
think I'm
I
right
feel like
about?
those are, yeah. So I'd say like to split those into two, like we can address, let's say, shadow banning really quick, and then we can expand on the shift of platforms, let's say potentially from TikTok to others.
Yeah. Well, I feel like shadow banning, it's kind of like a mythic unicorn. You're be like, are you shadow banned? I'm not gonna get shadow banned. Is it really a thing? Is shadow banning like, do you know what I'm saying? Everybody's like worried about getting shadow banned. Um, I think sometimes people shadow ban themselves by messing with those platforms where you buy followers, and it messes up your algorithm, because what happens is, if most of the people I know who think that they think are shadow banned, that's what's going on. They've purchased some followers. They hired an agency to help them grow their followers, and those agencies all promise those are 100% authentic, real followers, all that stuff. And then what happens is, like, you mess up your algorithm, because you've got these accounts that you follow that are following you, that when you publish content, they're not going to real people. They're just like static accounts. They're actually, like, if you get 1 million followers and like 70% of them are fake, those aren't real. They're not even engaging. They're not even real people, right? So then you got to purchase your engagement in order to kind of make your account continue to look good. And then it's just a big Frankenstein account, right? So you've got this big Frankenstein account. So yeah, is that account shadow banned? Probably not even shadow banned, probably just like messed up your own engagement. So I think that a lot of times the majority of what I've seen is that, and not real shadow banning. The majority of what I
Mm.
say. Now, I'm not saying that the mythic unicorn of the shadow ban monster ain't out there. I don't know. Like, I've always just found that what I've run into is I had different feelings and thoughts about that. And then even running analysis software on their accounts, I can usually see it. I've had, many, and Joe, you and I both have the kind of software where we could really go through and look at an account and see what's really going on. And typically it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know
I mean,
that
I don't know,
Twitter
you
ha
might have a different thought about the shadow ban monster.
yeah. Yeah, I think I mean there's a couple of different things. Like I know Twitter has when they released like the Twitter files and all of that, like there was actually indicators that there was a way to kind of suppress accounts and things like that.
For
So
sure.
that is
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
built into platforms. But I think when it comes to, with creators and what's going on there, there's a couple of things. Like at the end of the day, yeah, building content that is engaging, to the audience is like one of the best ways to kind of avoid that. I think the consistent posting, at least on YouTube, is like a common one that I hear about. But I don't know, of course, the details of how the algorithm works there. But um, one thing that I do find interesting when it comes to like engagement, um, that we're seeing like on platform that um, is actually changing things, I feel, is people used to choose influencers just based off of engagement rate. It's 3% rule, like is always like anyone greater than 3% engagement, this is good. But since Instagram has introduced like hiding likes and things like that, there's a lot of engagement that is just you you see it as less than 1%. So if you're only viewing based off of that number, um, that doesn't lead to, I think, necessarily the best results because you're seeing that a lot of people are opting to just hide um, their likes. So that's another thing that I think is going to be shifting in the space. Like we've always felt like as we've worked with different agencies um, and brands, when it comes to this engagement number, um, like a lot of people were very dogmatic about the 3%. Like that was just like some number that, people have
Mm.
followed. But when it came down to working with these different influencers and using their content that they produce in like paid ads and seeing the sales that were driven by someone who had less than 1% of engagement, or when they posted into their Facebook group that they also owned, that drove, like 10x ROI. Like I've always felt that the engagement metric was a short-lived kind of metric. It's just like a quick rule of thumb, but like you are missing out on the details if you aren't really like zooming in on the influencer. So that's
Yeah.
been interesting because as a platform, like we think about, okay, what is the metric that people then pay attention to, or how do we help people kind of evaluate different influencers? And one thing that we kind of are thinking about or lean towards is like the median views, because a lot of video content is being produced, and when we're talking about the impressions, then you can start to understand maybe a views to followers metric, so you
Hmm.
understand how many views you're going to get relative to how many followers this person has.
Right.
Because some people are going to get more engagement views wise. Like you said, you have 15,000 followers, but you get 25,000 views versus some people might have 15,000 followers and get 1,000 views. So those are
Right.
the like little details that I think a lot of teams aren't actively maybe fully thinking about because they're really caught up on the just engagement piece.
Yeah, we actually don't even use engagement for analyzing our followers. We look at a few things. One is quality of their content. So I call it internally, we call it QC. And then I call it QF, which is quality of their followers. So we've got advanced tools that, Joe, you probably have too. And I don't know how many of those you make available on your platform to show people the quality of the followers that they have. And so you get a score from 0 to 100. And then we look at quality of engagers, QE. So it's quality of people engaging. So that way we know, hey, what's the quality of their followers generally? What's the quality of their engagement? If it's above 70% or higher, Joe, I think you guys rate that too, right? So then we know that they're actually going to be a good quality influencer, right? Overall, because we're looking at the quality of their engagers, the quality of their followers, and the quality of their content. And the quality of the content is super important too, because as you said, Joe, like, even if even if the influencer doesn't post that great, if they create a badass piece of content for the brand that we could run ads with, then what we do is in a campaign, we create a whole bucket, of content separate, and Mighty Scout does a great job capturing a bunch of that. We flag the stuff that we think is good and put it into a separate bucket, into a Google folder that we think is good for amplification. And so the brands that we work with, if we're not going to amplify it ourselves, we just give it to them for their paid ad team. Because as a full service agency, as a full service influence agency, and I say influence versus influencer because there's a lot of people who have influence. It's not just influencers. Some are creators, consider themselves creators. Some are celebrities. Some are influencers. Sometimes we partner with corporations and brands who also have social media accounts. So we say influence agency on our side, but we are specialized, right? So running a whitelisting campaign, will be in our side of the fence, but we don't do general ads through brands accounts. We take that content and we hand it back over to their traditional agency, or traditional digital agency, or social media agency, and let them run it because we stay focused on, specifically the influence game. But yeah, so we'll take that and put it into a separate bucket, and some of that content performs super well. So I mean, if you've got somebody who's got like maybe low quality followers and low quality engagement, but they create badass content, I might still be willing to work with them because that content could be gold. We could be gold for amplification on some level.
Yeah, that identifying those different pieces that can be amplified, I think is yeah, just pivotal for but you also I don't know if you necessarily know which ones are going to work or what's not. Like I've heard some I forget what they call it, like ugly content or something like that, like just can perform extremely well versus like once you predict and you're like, I think this should work, and it like doesn't at all. So
Dude,
just leaving it to the
totally.
algorithms and AI to kind of
Yeah, you
figure
really
it
don't
out.
know until you get there. But I've had plenty of clients. Clients are always several steps behind the game when it comes to this to social media in general. But um, especially in the influencer world, because I've had plenty of clients get us have recommend influencer, or they get content or a post from an influencer. Well, that's not even an influencer because they have this like kind of vinegar like
Yeah.
face because they're thinking like of an influencer as being like a Kim Kardashian, and then they get a post from a nano influencer that seems like a real person, and they're like, that's not an influencer. I'm telling you, like I have these conversations all the time where I'm trying to help them understand the value of these micro and nano influencers. And that's why I labeled them on our team as grassroots influencers, because what I found is that grassroots and premium, I found that most of our clients could understand the value of grassroots. That's why we started using the term grassroots. And I say
Yep.
these grassroots influencers, so older people, people my age, really. I'm one of the very, very few people my age that, in your 40s and 50s that are understand, digital marketing like that, because I've been in it since the very beginning, and staying up to date and modifying. But so I'm not calling people old. I'm in that bucket, the 40s, you know what I mean? So I'm not trying to be mean to my own age bracket, but I'm just saying they're not really, understanding the value because they're not keeping up with the times necessarily. They don't see the value of what these things really are, and the importance of these grassroots, but they understand grassroots. They
Yep.
understand that word. And so as soon as you say grassroots, they're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, we want grassroots. Oh yeah, we need grassroots.
That's sometimes you gotta say it's all in the marketing sometimes.
It just
It
sometimes you just
just
gotta
in
say it the right way,
yeah.
bro.
Well, great. Last thing I'm gonna mention, yeah, because you mentioned like quality followers, quality engagers and things like that. So someone asked, like with Mighty Scout, you can also, look at a variety of these different things. So that's one way to do so. And I think with this, yeah, like we can pretty much end things here. I don't know if you have any last words that you want to share maybe with the audience, but I know, I mean, we'll be doing this again for sure. Like it was really fun. And I learned a lot.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just like
Love it.
I love that you just have such a breadth of knowledge with the history of all of this that like as we look into the future, you can also look into the past to kind of get these indicators of like how to
Yeah.
think about these things, like with the TikTok ban and like with different tools. And I think, yeah, just
Yep.
being extremely adaptable as an agency, given your vast experience with a variety of blockbusters and like again, being early in like how you actually develop the strategy to get these things out there and make things go viral has been really, really awesome to hear about.
Oh, that's awesome, bro. Well, hey, same man. Every time you and I talk, I always learn something new, and it'd be fun too. We do some more of these to pull some other people in the conversation thread, and actually hear some different thoughts too. But it's a blast. I learn something new every day, and I'm always like, every time there's a new creak in the floor, I'm like, what's that? I'm always trying to like hear what's going on. Like a dad listening to his kid trying to sneak out at night. I'm always like listening to hear what's going on in the industry because like I just love, the industry. I've really, dedicated my life to it. So it's really, my career, not my whole life. Obviously I got a wife and kid and, all that stuff.
Really
Oh yeah,
appreciate
the best.
really appreciate you hopping on, Rick. Always a
Yeah,
blast. And
same, bro.
yeah, let's keep in touch, man.
All right, look forward to it. Look forward to part two. Many more.